At its peak, this wasn't just some TV show about cars. It was a global phenomenon, a cultural touchstone that completely redefined what a nonfiction show could even be. But like any massive empire, its fall was every bit as dramatic as its rise. So today, we're going to dive into the full story of Top Gear's impossible collapse. Okay, so that's the big question we're tackling, right? How does a show that's watched by hundreds of millions of people, a massive money-making machine for one of the biggest broadcasters in the world, just implode? And this wasn't some slow, sad decline into irrelevance. No, this was a series of massive explosions ending in a tragedy that absolutely no one saw coming.
All right, so to really get how it all ended, we've got to start, well, near the end. The date is December 13th, 2022. The show, after years and years of turmoil, had actually found a new groove with a new set of hosts. One of them, the former cricket superstar Andrew "Freddie" Flintoff, is behind the wheel of this notoriously tricky Morgan three-wheeler for a film segment. And what happened next was just horrific. The car, going at speed, flips over. Flintoff, who wasn't wearing a helmet at the time, is gravely injured. He survives, which is a miracle, honestly. But the physical and psychological scars are deep. His face is permanently disfigured, and the trauma of it all would haunt him for years. I mean, this was a real, life-altering accident, happening on the set of an entertainment show. Just unbelievable. After that, the BBC, what could they do? They had no choice. Production was stopped immediately. A few months go by, and then the official announcement drops. Top Gear was being put on an indefinite hiatus. The show that survived scandal after scandal, controversy, a complete change of cast, was finally stopped dead in its tracks by one single tragic accident. But here's the thing. The seeds for this downfall were planted years, and I mean years before. So, to really understand this, we need to go back, way back. Before all the drama and the insane global fame, Top Gear was something completely different. Let's take a look at how this juggernaut was built from the ground up. Okay, so the original Top Gear, let's be honest, it was kind of boring. It was your standard, pretty practical motoring magazine show. Think consumer advice, road safety tests, really sensible reviews. It was useful, sure, but it wasn't exactly must-see TV. But then, a certain personality got thrown into the mix who started to inject this more opinionated, much edgier style. So after it got canceled and then rebooted, 2003 is where our story really kicks off. This is the moment the final piece of the puzzle just clicks into place. James May joins Jeremy Clarkson and Richard Hammond, and boom, the iconic trio is born. This combination would become the face of the show for the next 12 years and launch it into the stratosphere. And when I say they launched it into the stratosphere, I am not kidding. Just look at this number. At its absolute peak, Top Gear was pulling in an estimated 350 million viewers around the world. Seriously, just let that number sink in for a second. It wasn't just the biggest car show on Earth, it was one of the biggest television shows, full stop. So what was the secret? What was the magic formula? Look, this kind of success doesn't just happen by accident. It was built on a very specific and very powerful formula that mixed pure spectacle with something way more relatable. And what's so wild is how these two things just fed into each other. On one side, you had the sheer spectacle. As more people watched, the budget got bigger. And that meant more ambitious, more insane stunts, like racing a Bugatti against a fighter jet or driving a pickup truck to the North Pole. It created this amazing cycle of just epic television. But that wasn't the real secret sauce. The real magic, the reason 350 million people were tuning in, was the chemistry, the banter, the arguments, the feeling that you were just hanging out with three middle-aged buddies messing around with cars. And honestly, I think this one comment from a fan on YouTube just nails it. People who couldn't care less about cars would watch Top Gear every single week. Why? Because it was a show about friendship and adventure and humor. The cars were just the excuse to get them all together. And this is the absolute key to the whole story. The show wasn't the format, it was the people. And that was about to become a very, very big problem. But that same rebellious, kind of anti-authority vibe that made the show feel so different? Well, it had a dark side. For years, the hosts, especially Jeremy Clarkson, walked a very fine line. But eventually, the cracks started to appear as they began to step over that line again and again.
And man, 2014 was a really, really bad year for them. First, down in Argentina, a license plate on one of their cars was seen as a deliberate, super offensive reference to the Falklands War. The BBC swore it was a coincidence, but the local anger was so intense the entire crew literally had to flee the country. Then, during their Burma special, Clarkson was caught on camera using a derogatory racial slur. And to top it all off, some unaired footage leaked where he appeared to mumble the N-word while reciting a kid's rhyme. A very clear, very ugly pattern was starting to emerge. So after all these racism accusations, the BBC was in a really tough spot. I mean, how do you fire the host of your most profitable show in the world? But they couldn't just ignore it either. So they gave Clarkson a final warning. One more slip-up, they said, and there would be serious consequences. The fuse was lit, you know? The stage was set for one last huge showdown. And right in the middle of this whole media firestorm, his co-host James May came out and defended him, in his own very James May kind of way. This quote tells you so much about the dynamic of that trio. It shows this fierce loyalty they had for each other, even while basically admitting Clarkson could be an incredibly abrasive person. But that loyalty, it was about to face the ultimate test. You'd think, after all the international scandals, the on-air controversies, that the final straw would be something huge, right? Nope. The whole empire came crashing down because of an argument over a steak. Okay, so here's how it went down. March 4th, 2015. The crew is up in North Yorkshire after a long, hard day of filming. Clarkson gets back to the hotel and wants a hot steak. The producer, Oyvind Timon, tells him, sorry, the kitchen's closed. All we've got are cold food platters. And what happened next? Look, there's just no defending it. Clarkson completely lost it. He launched into this long, angry, verbal, and physical attack on Timon, and it ended with a punch that split the producer's lip. It was a total, shocking loss of control. So that final warning? Yeah, it had been breached in the most insane way possible. This wasn't some edgy joke that went too far. This was a physical assault on a member of his own team. The BBC launched an internal investigation, and the decision was swift. Jeremy Clarkson's contract was not going to be renewed. After 25 years, he was fired from the show that he turned into a global giant. But this is where the story gets really weird. You'd expect the public to be furious at Clarkson for what he did, but instead, a huge chunk of the fan base was furious at the BBC. A petition to get him his job back got over 1 million signatures in like a couple of days. A lot of fans even aimed their anger at the victim, Oyvind Timon, blaming him for getting their hero fired. And then, if that wasn't enough, came the final nail in the coffin for that era of Top Gear. Richard Hammond and James May, while they both said what Clarkson did was wrong, they chose to stick with their friend. They refused to do the show without him, and they quit in solidarity. The trio was officially broken. The magic was gone. So now the BBC is left holding this massive, globally famous brand, but the three guys who made it special, they're gone. What came next was this desperate, years-long attempt to prove that the show was bigger than the hosts, an attempt to somehow recapture lightning in a bottle. Their first shot at a reboot was, and I'm being nice here, a total disaster. They brought in this really popular presenter, Chris Evans, to lead a new team. But this chart, it says everything you need to know. Clarkson's last episode got 5.8 million viewers in the UK. By the end of that first new season, the audience had collapsed to just 1.9 million. It was so clear. The audience had spoken. They didn't just want Top Gear. They wanted their Top Gear. And just to rub a little more salt in the wound for the BBC, the original trio didn't just fade away. They took their massive global audience and a rumored $250 million budget from Amazon and launched their own show, The Grand Tour, and it was a huge hit. Meanwhile, back at the BBC, they finally found a little bit of hope with a new lineup starring Freddie Flintoff. The chemistry wasn't the same, but you know what? It was starting to work, until that awful day in December 2022. So when you look back at it, the whole story of Top Gear's downfall is this incredible case study, isn't it? It really makes you ask a fundamental question. What happens when the most valuable part of a billion-dollar brand isn't the name or the logo or the format, but the flawed, irreplaceable, chaotic chemistry between a few people? Is it even possible to recreate that kind of magic? For Top Gear, well, that question is still hanging in the air.